All right, everyone. Welcome to the Stoa. Today we have Charles Eisenstein with us. Charles is an author of numerous wonderful books, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible, The Ascent of Humanity, and this one right here, Sacred Economics. And today I've been a lot of requests from Charles actually since the Stoa began. So this session has been long coming, and I'm very grateful to have him here because all around he's an amazing human being, as I'm sure many of you know. And I was thinking the session could be rather open when we pivot to the Q&A, similar to Daniel Schmachenberger's Philosopher in Residence series, or when ContraPoints came on. Charles comes, sits at the digital porch, and just philosophically jams with us. So if you have any questions about any of his ideas, books, or recent articles, feel free to throw them in the chat anytime. This will be on YouTube, so I can read your question on your behalf if you don't want to be on YouTube. And of course, we won't get to all the questions and probably won't get to them in order. So that being said, I'll warm up Charles with a few questions on my own about some of his recent Substack pieces. But first, Charles, welcome to the Stoa. Thank you for coming here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Peter. Happy to be here.
And so I've been, as we were jamming before we let people in, I've been enjoying your recent Substack pieces. And the one that made me reach out was How It's Going to Be entry, where you talked about prophetic speech. And you used examples like Elon Musk, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, about how certain speeches can manifest things into existence. And you had like three ingredients: seeing a real vision, like service, sacrificing for service, and community. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on those three things, like why those three things and how are they related to one another?
Yeah, so probably everybody has had the experience of trying to make something happen, and you have this vision and you tell people about it. And for some reason, no one really believes you, and it just kind of doesn't happen. And you talked about it over beers, and maybe other people have their ideas, and nothing really happens. Except some people. I first experienced this when I was living in Taiwan, and I became friends with these musicians who were like, we're gonna have Taiwan's first alternative music festival. We're gonna bus people down from Taipei to the southern tip of the island. We're gonna have it at this beach, like they had all these grand plans. Every alternative band is gonna come. And the thing is, everybody who they told that vision to believed them. And because they believed them, it actually happened. Like I was publishing a zine at the time. This is before the internet. I put stuff in the zine about it. Like different people contributed different things. And so basically they spoke it into existence. And I thought, what differentiates them from all these other people who want something to happen and talk about it? And everyone's like, yeah, let me know if it's actually happening and then maybe I'll participate. But I don't want to waste my time. Well, if everybody has that attitude, then nothing ever happens. So this is where that inquiry began. And so, like you mentioned, I invoked Elon Musk. I mean, not that I agree with the things that he wants to happen on this earth, 34,000 satellites in near Earth orbit all the time, et cetera, Internet of Things, okay, whatever it is. But like when the guy says, when you ask, what's the next year going to be like? What's the next 10 years going to be like? I mean, this is a question a lot of people have these days in this time of uncertainty. Someone like Elon Musk takes that question in a very different way than other people. It's not, let's wait and see what's going to happen so we can react to it. It's like, oh, I'll tell you what's going to happen. Like that question is an opportunity to narrate what is to be into existence. So for that to happen, as you were saying, the first thing that's required is that you can't be making it up. You have to actually see a real possibility that you can distinguish from your fantasies, distinguish from your self-importance, distinguish from um, what will get approval from other people of you. Like there's a lot of psychological work that often has to do with sovereignty and being unapologetically oneself that is required to actually see a vision clearly. Although sometimes it's so strong that it just takes you. But that's one thing. So because when you've actually seen it for real, then when you speak of it, people can detect the ring of truth. You say it is going to happen. Not that it is a certainty, but it's a reality in one of many futures that are, in a quantum juxtaposition of existence. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that because this future is not already here, something has to change. For something to change, something has to be lost. And that loss normally has an inner dimension for the vision holder, for the vision sayer, for the prophet. Something, whatever attachment you have to the way things are, has to drop away. So the sacrifice could be of, I mean, just at the very least, of other possibilities and of your comfort with those, with your comfort of being in current conditions. So this is coming up a lot now as our society faces turmoil and a lot of choice points. For example, do we want to head toward a technocratic utopia slash dystopia where neural links to computers and AI and machine human interfaces and you know society run by algorithms and we're all linked in the Internet of Things, getting our immunity updates every 6 months. Like like that's a vision of the future that is exciting for some people and disturbing for others. Is that what is to be? Or is it something else? And how am I, like, what's my comfort? What's my psychological buy-in to the reality I say I don't want? Okay, so that's the sacrifice. And it could be a sacrifice of, money, reputation, identity, something like that. And then the third thing you mentioned is community. Like for me, to hold a countercultural vision, a new possibility, like I can't do it on my own. I have to have other people who recognize the vision that I see. And when my vision falters, when I can't see it, they can remind me of what I have seen, that it's real, that I'm not just in a fantasy or a delusion. So yeah, those are the three things that I wrote about in that essay.
Mhm. And I've been thinking a lot about kind of like the balance between this prophetic speech and what you called prophetic warning. And you ended that article with a quote that I'll read it. A lot of scary futures are showing themselves us today: totalitarianism, social breakdown, ecological collapse, civil conflict. It's basically like the meta crisis, what we talk about here at the Stoa. And there's so much hellish scenarios and a lot of prophetic warnings out there, but I don't see a lot of like inspiring prophetic speech, like towards a heavenly existence rather than away from a hellish one. And you referred to something, as a previous book, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know is Possible. And it seems like we need both, but I'm curious what your thought is. Like, what's the right balance between the two, the prophetic warning and prophetic speech? Because there's like too much warning, then Mark Fisher's phrase, reflective impotence, comes to mind. It's like, bad shit's happening, and it's almost like it's a self-fulfilling or world-fulfilling prophecy. It's like you bring it about. So it seems like there needs to be a balance there. And I see
Yeah.
most political mimetic tribal spectrums and ecologies are really good at prophetic warnings, but not so good at prophetic, speech. So I'm wondering what your sense of a balance is between the two, and why does the latter seem so difficult today?
Yeah. If all you have is the warnings and you don't have a positive vision that people can serve, then they just get cynical and apathetic, and then vulnerable to anybody's prophetic speech. Prophetic speech doesn't have to be a good uh, future. Like Adolf Hitler was a master of prophetic speech in a certain sense. Uh, he offered a world story, a future, and therefore a role for individuals to occupy and an identity for them that filled a vacuum, that took advantage of the vulnerability of that they had through social breakdown. And we are in a time right now of a collapse of meaning, sense, identity, social systems. Like it is like many people are in the kind of situation that cults usually prey on. Like cults try to find vulnerable people who are in between stories, and like masses of people are in that situation now, which leaves our society ripe for fascism. Um, and so like this state of cynicism, despair, uh, uncertainty, this is actually quite a dangerous situation. So um, yeah, so I just I agree that we need, beyond the prophetic warning, we need really to articulate visions of futures that we have actually seen. I wrote an article more recently called Beyond Industrial Medicine that invoked this quite a bit. I was like, here we're facing a health crisis in some sense that is unprecedented. Well, what happened to like the last 40 or 50 years of the development of alternative and holistic medicine? Like, where are the people saying, um, we're not healthy right now. Let's get people outside. Let's get them in the forests. Let's get them in the garden. Let's really heal people's body ecology with probiotics. Let's restore traditional herbal knowledge. Like all these things we that have given us a glimpse of what medicine could be, what health could be. They just kind of like have gotten ignored as the mass of the population has defaulted to a pretty narrow orthodoxy. So like so besides like there are people warning against VACCINESs or warning against this, warning against that. Like where's the positive vision of how society could take care of each other, take care of ourselves? Like that, we need that in addition to all of the criticisms. Otherwise, you know, like, okay, it sucks, but what am I going to do? And who can I be in relation to a possibility? Mhm.
Mm. And in that same piece, you were talking to a healer that says that recommended that you got to take up more space, essentially. um, uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, so I'm curious if you can share what your vision is, your beautiful vision. Maybe if it's just a glimpse or it's forming right now. If you have any that you could share.
I mean, there's so many dimensions to it, but like imagine a world where most of the time the loudest sound that you can hear is birds singing and children playing. Imagine a world where when a child is born, the first thing they hear is the village singing them into the world. Imagine a world where when you go outdoors, every person that you see normally throughout your day is somebody who you know deeply, and no one is afraid to make extended eye contact. And you feel fully at home where every feature of the land that you look at has stories attached to it, has a history attached to it. Every tree and plant that you see, you have a relationship to. You know their uses, you know their names, you know what birds nest in that particular tree and what their habits are. Like we're embedded in layer after layer after layer of relationship, extending beyond just the place, but intimately including the place, extending out through multiple tribes, multiple connections across the whole planet, where our lives are devoted to furthering life and beauty. See, the thing is, when I start to explain it, it's um, really what I like to say is you've already seen it too. This isn't. It's not like my job to describe it in detail, because even if I describe a little piece of it, that's enough, because that piece can only exist if all the other pieces exist. And I've only seen clearly a few pieces, and maybe you've seen clearly a few other pieces in some of the peak experiences of your life, maybe on a psychedelic journey, maybe at the bedside of a dying loved one, maybe in some extraordinary circumstance where everybody is effortlessly doing exactly what is theirs to do in this coordination, this cooperation. Like maybe you've had an experience like that, an experience of forgiveness and generosity, of healing in a social circumstance, of a miracle of healing in your own body. Like when I wrote this, people were writing to me like, yeah, like why have we not been taking these things as real and casting them into the waste bin of anomaly, or just like banishing them from practicality and reality? We have to take these extraordinary data points into the picture in order to see what is possible. And everybody listening here, in one way or another, has seen this future. And so my job is not so much to describe it, but to point to that experience in you, that in which it wasn't like this aberration, but when you knew that a world could be built on this, you can feel that this is real. It's a glimpse of a future that would not be given to you to see if it were not actually possible, and if you did not have a role to play in bringing it about, in serving the future that had shown itself to you through this experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And when you were speaking, it was resonating with a certain, like right here in my chest. And like last time that was so potent, I had like a few psychotic breaks in my life. And one of them, I just glimpsed at like beauty itself and it's like its purest form. And then it imprinted itself on me. And when I find people are having that prophetic speech, poetry usually comes out, and your language was pretty poetic in the beginning. It just resonates with that sense that got imprinted. And that's what I want to be oriented towards. And I think I sense a lot of people in this room and kind of our space are orientated towards it as well. Um, so yeah, let's get some other voices in here, because there's a bunch of questions in the chat. Um, Max, I'll take you in for the first question.
Hello, Charles. Would you say prophetic speech is more akin to like channeling of like a future that is already set in their imaginary or visions that they have, or it's more akin to like a spell casting of like, this is how I want things to be, and I'm gonna rationalize whatever I need to rationalize in order to make my future happen. To give a tiny bit of context with Elon Musk, is like when he's saying, be careful of AI because it's gonna take us over, the solution is an implant in your brain. You know, we need to merge it to fight the future. And I find it, is it not a rationalization over the future that he actually wants to happen? And then because he has a position of authority and power that has been granted to him thanks to all the good things that he done in the past, then maybe he can take it in the, like a spelling, the casting a spell that he wants actually to make happen.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is both. The wanting opens the doors to seeing a certain future. It's so there are multiple futures that all exist, and that and that each have a timeline going toward that future. that converges on the present moment. They are mutually contradictory. They can't all happen, but they are different from a fantasy about the future that might be based on your desires. So like, I could be like, wow, I love candy and lollipops, and I envision a future where lollipops grow on trees, and the fountains bubble with chocolate soda. Like, okay, that is not an actually existing future, however much I want it. However, my wanting attunes me to see certain real futures, which are like on a menu. So the spell casting then is, I mean, what is actually a spell? A spell, like real magic, is the manipulation of perception and attention. So there is a spell casting that orients masses of people through words into entrainment with a certain one of these many futures that maybe, playing on their own conscious or unconscious desires. Like maybe there's this desire to be just taken care of, this infantile desire that can be invoked by a word master to control people. I mean, salesmen cast a spell all the time. So yeah, it is a spell casting. The thing is though, that these this menu of futures is not actually created by human beings consciously. No one designs the future, not even Elon Musk. He's not designing a future. He is revealing a future, contributing to a future that is itself a being that has recruited him to want to happen. And yeah, so that's how I see it. It's a bit metaphysical, but yeah.
Any follow-up shares, Max?
So it seems in your perspective that is more an agent of a higher power that is executing, instead of him really having agency over the unfolding of the future, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's an agent of steering himself and humanity toward that future, onto that timeline, but he does not create the destination. And this could get even more metaphysical about like who is the creator of these futures, and then we get into nonlinear dynamics and emergence and complexity theory, and like imagine if you're navigating the Mandelbrot set, and like you can find pretty much any structure you want to, but you don't create the structures. You navigate down the path that goes to that particular structure.
Awesome. Thanks, Max. Laura, you had a question.
Thank you so much for joining, Charles. It's an honor to have you here. I have a few questions. I have many questions. I'll try to just ask maybe one or two. But I was just wondering, even just noticing your tapestry and your sweater, they look very traditional in a way. They look very, yeah, like of another age. And I wondered what relationship you have to the past and to tradition, and what you see its role as like a life-giving forces in our modern society.
Wow. Thank you for that question. I am a little suspicious, a lot suspicious, of the obsession with novelty. It's part of the ideology of progress that devalues tradition, devalues the old, and sees human advancement as a transcendence of our biology, our nature. It's part of the ideology of rising above materiality that began thousands of years ago, when the lowest social class was the farmer who worked in the dirt, and the highest was the king whose feet were not allowed to touch the ground. So this is part of a rejection of the world, rejection of nature that makes human beings something separate and aspires, to overcome death itself, to overcome nature completely, to live in a cyber world. So that's part of it. And then, yeah, like I feel so many gifts that were laid down by ancestors and ancient people through wisdom traditions, through sacred stories, through um, uh, other ways of transmitting knowledge. And I want to receive those gifts. And those are not always or not usually even something that I can put into concepts. But yeah, like this sweater, my mother used to wear this, who's passed away. And there's something, who am I? I'm not a person who wears this sweater or that shirt or something else and is the same. Who I am is the totality of every relationship I have. I become a different person when I wear this sweater, just as I become a different person when I speak to you than I would be if I'm speaking to anybody else. This is not only is this moment unique, but who I am right now is unique, and who you are right now is unique. You will never be this person again. So for me, it's like this, it's almost like a selfish desire to fully receive all of the gifts that are being offered and not repudiate those that some ideology of progress and novelty has devalued.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very beautiful. I wonder about like what this, yeah, how to dialogue with the present moment that has so many elements that are so foreign. There was so much development that happened so quickly in the last 150 years. So it's like, what does it mean to kind of bring those gifts of ancient wisdom of our, yeah, of our, yeah, all the ancestors that we have to the internet, to our new kind of global economy and our new way of kind of our isolated way of living in community or not community. Like how do you bring those now?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is in not taking for granted the internet, and global economy. Not that I necessarily want these to go away, but I recognize that they have encroached on domains of life that need to be reclaimed. And maybe the role of the global economy should be less. Maybe the role of the internet should be less. Maybe, I mean, I know I want to be more related to the land where I live, even the small garden that I have. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there something you called for another share, Laura? I feel it.
Just a little question. Thank you, Peter. I just wonder, yeah, how do you do it without just trying to kind of like recreate the past, like without the kind of, it feels like there's a real creativity that's called for right now. So what does it look like to bring those ancient traditions, like to truly meet the moment?
Yeah. It's not about recreating the past. It's about when I receive these gifts, when I even hold them as valuable, when I even like go outside and I look at this half-acre patch of land that I live on as a being. And I observe it day after day after day, and I get to know it like I would get to know a person. I just have that experience, and then I know what to do. Because what I do takes into account that integration of all of those moments. So, like if you even spend time meditating on your ancestors, you don't need to have the how answered by me. You'll know. Like who you are will change when you start seeing things that modern ideology prevents you from seeing. Then ceremony will come back into your life. Authentic ceremony that's not a copy of some indigenous culture.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. James, you had a question. If you can unmute yourself.
Hi. I just wanted to follow up on the first question about the idea of the vision for the future, and this idea of Elon Musk kind of almost receiving a vision from something, some other entity, energy, and knowing which of these visions, if any, are the right ones to go towards or explore. Because as I said in the question, I can see multiple possibilities, almost as if from different energies or archetypes, and I don't know how to tell which are more true or which are, if that's the right framework to follow, or which are more beautiful, and which to trust in essence.
Mm-hmm. I think you probably do know, actually. And what happens to me sometimes is that I know, but I don't dare. And I, in those situations, when I can't fully trust which one makes me feel good, which one makes me feel most alive, then I do go to community. I go to other people who help me trust myself, because maybe they see it too, and they see me. Really, the question is, so a lot of the, for me, a lot of the uncertainty, and maybe this is true for you as well, I export it onto which of these futures is the best. But really, the core of the uncertainty is, who do I want to be in this life? Because the painful truth of this realm is that you can do anything you want, but you can't do everything you want. The nature of this realm is about choice. So the question is, who do I want to be in this one lifetime that I have as me? And the coming to face the grief of the loss of all that I could have been by choosing one future, one dedication, one path, and therefore one self. That coming to terms with that and feeling that grief is indispensable for me to be able to make clear, decisive choices. So I don't know how much of this applies to you, but for me, it is about facing the reality of my mortality. The more I do that, the more clear it becomes what I want to serve, and the more able I am to commit to something and to be someone, and not all the others.
Any follow-up share, James?
I think it's something I need to sit with a little longer. And there's certain ideas that might come to mind of what that might mean for me. It's, I guess that the first thing though that comes to mind is that and I think, and I'm trying not to, well, I trying to find the right word, sorry. I think I'm being shown that my vision for who I want to be and who I think I am and the world that I think I want is actually different than what brings me most alive, potentially who I even truly am. And that is where a lot of the uncertainty lies for me, where it could be as simple as, okay, this morning I want to fast and have coffee, and I think that would make me feel better. And with what's going on with my body these days, my body will literally just not let me move until 3 o'clock, until I finally go, okay, let's try the porridge and buckwheat or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden I can move, I have energy, I do feel alive. And whereas once the weights in the gym looked threatening and dreadful, now I can't help myself but to pick them up and throw them about or do X, Y, and Z or go for a run. And it's just like, it's my continual experience where it's like my body, my soul seems to be pointing in a different direction than my mind might. And that's where the confusion is. It's like, I don't even have a way of mostly knowing where my body is pointing me. So it's like, it's not even like, okay, I'm gonna have porridge. It's more like, okay, I have to try the porridge and I have to try the eggs and then I have to try this. And I was like, oh, finally I get it. So it's this kind of confusing, like, it's not like my body saying, this is your vision. It's like, I have to feel it out moment by moment. It's almost as if there is no vision, but it's just like one step at a time. But with where I'm at, it's like, it's really confusing because if I don't get it right, I can be stuck in a chair or in my bed for hours at a time. And then I do get it right and everything flows. But it's a lot of times that flowing is different than what I want. And I'm either trying to find a way for them to come together or to like somehow let go such that I'm like, okay, right, we're going this way. And I will find out that eventually this is actually what I want, even though I'm a little afraid of it, or it does not match my vision of who I would like to be or my identity, etc. So I ultimately think that the person who I want to be probably matches that. And it's something I need to dwell on, especially that idea of considering my mortality and the limited time I have here. Who is the person I want to be? But I'm sort of guessing that even if it's a reluctant going this way, that those things might line up eventually. So yeah, that's the share. And thanks.
Thanks, James. Benita Roy, you had a question.
Hi, thanks so much, Charles, for gifting us your time.
Hi, Benita. It's so good to see you.
I
was
have
just talking about you a couple weeks ago with
that's why my ears were burning.
Yeah.
Listen, this is something I'm working on that. Okay, I'll just ask the question and then maybe you'll get into the metaphysics. But I'm wondering what the notion, how the notion of will comes to you in your work. This is not this. You can't find a lot of discussion around this, and then maybe I'll tell you something weird, but just orient around that for us, please.
Yeah, will. I mean, that's a. Can you be a little more specific?
Because like it's like, okay, it has a background in this work I'm doing with some people, but it's like when I see you, you're obviously, you hold this vision, but you're like an animal, like you can just see it, you know, like there's we don't like to talk about will because it's associated with the will to power in Nazism, but so is vision, as you said. And I've been trying to figure out something about, I have this group, and there's Americans in the group, and then there's a woman from Mexico City and people from Peru. And the Americans are lost in psychological infinite hall of mirrors.
Yeah.
And the people in the other culture, it takes a while. We worked together for 2 years. At first, they're very confused, and then, anyways, so that's the background. But the other day, actually just yesterday, I had this mantra, you know, these phrases that come to you. And the mantra was, the psyche is where the will goes to die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Because it's like this relinquishment of sovereignty and in favor of all these like psychological forces that, you know, to which we're subject. If you're subject to them, then you're no longer the king, you're a subject. No longer the queen, no longer the sovereign. Will is the full embodiment and claiming of your yes. Like, I will. And to be alive at the most basic level, and to be a sovereign being, is to be the master of your yes and your no. Even a bacteria has a yes and a no. It goes towards something it likes, it goes away from danger. In modern society, we are trained and broken from a very early age to no longer own our own yes and our own no. But is it okay? Like, can I want that? Am I allowed to want that? So other people, like, you know, from other cultures, maybe are not so broken, not so ashamed of themselves, and therefore not so dependent on an external authority to which they've surrendered their will. To reclaim will, the most fundamental primal reclamation of will is to reclaim the power of your own attention. Like, that's the most basic exercise of will, you know, which you could even do through meditation. I mean, fundamentally, it's, you know, if you're not exercising an intention about your attention, then it's not meditation. I mean, that's fundamentally what it is. So, yeah, someone with strong will is somebody who is fully here, or is more fully here. It is an attribute of fully being. So to strengthen the will is to be more fully in this world, to exist more intensely. I mean, I could say more about it, but that's pretty dense already. Maybe it's
Yeah, I mean, maybe something, one of your great articles will come out of it, because I think that,
yeah.
I mean, obviously I'm preoccupied with it just lately, but you know, one of the things people will say, and it's problematic to all this crisis and meaning crisis and destruction, the psyche is so vulnerable to it. And I was saying that the world is workable if you know how to live in it, but it's like the world becomes psychoactive to people in a way. All we were doing was noting body sensations, and that already became so psychoactive that people spiraled out of control. that's when I started to think there was something interesting going on.
Mhm. Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah. It's really, really disheartening sometimes.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe just a little bit more embodiment is a good first step.
Yeah, and to me, that's that sense of we've done some on the Stoa when we talk about the will, people get really this feeling of embodiment and often report they feel like an animal. And yeah, so anyways, I just wanted to ask you if you had a metaphysical kind of understanding of will. Something to think about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Benita. Lori, you had a question. You can unmute yourself and ask it.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Charles. And yeah, I really enjoyed the essay too. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the question. So how much do you think the lack of these visions now might be the result of a really bruising 20th century? There were the grand narratives, and people there were kind of speaking their visions, if you like, into reality. And that, for lots of people, they look back on that as a period of kind of chaos and destruction. And I just wonder whether, if people are reluctant to speak their visions into reality and to follow visions as a result of, that in our recent history, what can we do to kind of move people on from that?
Yes. I think of where we are right now is so much a product of the disintegration of the unifying vision of civilization that reached its pinnacle in the very beginning of the 20th century and began to disintegrate in 1914. And it wasn't the mass of society that became conscious of the disintegration, but that's when the avant-garde became aware that this Cartesian vision of science and technology ushering in a perfect society wasn't going to happen. The industrial scale savagery of World War I really put that to rest, that science, reason, industry, technology was going to be the deliverance of human beings, of human civilization. And we've been, and so that vision has been like chunk after chunk has been peeling off of that vision ever since. Visions themselves, realities themselves, futures themselves are beings that have a life cycle. And this one is in a state of advanced senescence right now. It is no longer young and robust. And it no longer, like people no longer believe it, People don't actually believe anymore in technological utopia. It's this forlorn, grasping hope, this empty ideology that finally nanotech and genetic engineering is going to accomplish what, freaking electricity. The steam engine was supposed to accomplish this centuries ago. It isn't happening. And it's more than just technological utopia. It's a whole vision of the human being and how to run a society and how to run a self, how to be human. That's been in an accelerating state of decay for the last century. And in some parts of the world, this is a much more recent thing. But I'm just kind of generalizing to the West. So yeah, like we're grappling with this unraveling and the splintering. This is like the mimetic tribalism that Peter talks about, like the splintering of our perceptual and conceptual commons into these mutually exclusive shards that we don't even maybe we don't even fully believe in them either. Like there's this kind of, even for the most fervent people, there's also like this this cynicism where it just kind of doesn't all seem real. Like we're stepping back from reality itself. Young people talk about derealization, like walking through this cardboard world. It's like actors in a play who have lost their immersion in the drama and become more and more self-conscious that they're just acting out a role. That doesn't mean that we are permanently awakening from the human drama and rising above it. What it means is that this particular drama is no longer worth our participation. We're like, no, this play is actually done. And why are we continuing to play these roles anymore? Let's find a better one. Let's find one that imagine that we're all actors here, all professional actors. And we're like, like this one isn't really exercising my full talents as an actor, casting director, find me something else. Like we're all like, find me something else. Find me something that I can lose myself in, commit to, sink my life into. Yeah. Yeah, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, that felt really alive. Laura, do you have any quick follow-up share?
Absolutely not.
Charles, are you okay if I sneak in two more questions? Maybe we'll go 5-10 minutes after the hour.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Okay, cool. We got some good ones. Lisa, you had a question or a share.
Yeah, thank you, Charles, for all your work. I wanted to build on this idea of derealization and realization. It's interesting that you use the example of that moment of 1914, because this is so interestingly resonant with a conversation we had yesterday about the philosophy of the Unabomber. And Max was talking about actually, he used the moment of the the Industrial Revolution, basically, as the moment where we became so entangled and exponentially capable of extending our human destructive tendencies beyond our capability to control them. So I think, as you say, the derealization, the narrative story is crumbling, and yet our nanotechnologies are real. And whatever we think about the fog of war around the virus, it's still a virus that is real. So I wonder if you could comment on those entangled ontologies and how you find peace with it for yourself in terms of your own metaphysics. Thank you.
Yeah. Nanotechnology is real. What it is, though, I was just reading a fascinating paper in, I guess we could say, philosophy of biology. It's, I think I have it on my, I still have it in my browser here. Yeah, What is Life by Gunther Witzani, Frontiers in Astronomy and Space Sciences. And he's talking about he's applying, boy, this is really long. He's applying linguistic theories of context dependence, that meaning is not a function of the code itself alone, but also like who's communicating. Like you cannot separate semantics from relationship. And he's saying the same is actually true of the code of life, of genetics. Like you can't decode the genome without taking into account all the communication that's happening in the community of life. So this, what is nanotechnology? What is AI? These are not isolable existential questions. Like they are dependent on the context, including the mythological context, the stories that we're telling about ourselves, about who we are and why we're here. And they become something very different when we take on a different understanding of those deep questions. So it's not, and yeah, they also condition the answers to those questions. So it's not quite as simple as I'm making it out. Like when you're immersed in a certain technological context, then some things become very hard to see. And you know, and maybe our job is to help penetrate that veil. And maybe, you know, these kinds of technologies in the future become much more limited in their application. And we put a lot more of our total cultural energy into, you know, technologies of soil, technologies of water, technologies of sound, technologies of light. But that doesn't necessarily mean that these disappear entirely. And technologies of word, story itself. I typically operate under the story of that the virus is real, even though I'm aware of alternative narratives in which it does not actually exist. And rather than try to pinpoint and like to pin down which is factually true in an objective external matrix of facts, I tend to see, I see these different theories as lenses. And what do they illuminate? What do they obscure? When are they useful? Like, you know, sometimes bioterrain theory is a lot more useful than looking at it through the lens of a virus. Not that these are necessarily mutually exclusive. So I think right now, I mean, maybe to just come to a more practical note, it's a good moment to become adept at applying different realities as needed and as necessary. And maybe this goes back to the very beginning. It's not that we just create willy-nilly whatever reality that we want. These already exist. I mean, there's a menu of them. Like a Chinese medical doctor, a Taoist, might use 5-element theory for one patient and yin-yang theory for another one, and like some other paradigm for another one, untroubled by the fact that these are mutually contradictory in some parts. No problem. Like we have to become like that as well. And not try to control everything by pinning it down in a theory of everything.
Any follow-up share, Lisa?
No, thanks, Charles. That was wonderful. Appreciate it.
And so Charles, you and I were talking beforehand how you're officially canceled, I think, or unofficially canceled because of a piece that you wrote on the unvaccinated and being scapegoated. And I was musing yesterday on one of my missives that, you know, the three sort of problem spaces of like thinking in public is A, getting censored, canceled, number 2, getting harassed, trolled, number 3, accidentally releasing like information hazards, as Nick Bostrom calls it. And so you went through some blowback after releasing that piece, and I'm curious if how you processed it personally, and how perhaps you're navigating those waters now, talking about these difficult things during difficult times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the level of cancellation I was subjected to is pretty mild, actually. You know, I had, as I said, my 15 minutes of infamy, and then those censorious forces moved on to fresh meat. But you know, it kind of like, yeah, sticks and stones may break my bones, etc. But like, it kind of hurt. You know what I mean? Just as a social being. To be denounced and rejected by people who had been longtime friends and allies, you know, and then people reaching out to programs I was on saying, if Charles Eisenstein's going to be on this program, I'm withdrawing my membership, you know, like really, like it was just like, it was kind of, and it was ironic that all this response came in response to an article I wrote on mob morality. It was like super ironic. and so now, yeah, I'm like, I'm not in the top rank of heretics, but I've definitely become a suspicious character. And it is what it is. I'm not it was actually kind of liberating in a way, because no longer did I feel like I had to be canny, and be discreet. Like, it's too late. Now I can pretty much say anything I want. And the worst that can happen is it'll confirm the already entrenched beliefs of those who have written me off anyway. So, I mean, it's kind of disturbing, just in an abstract way, that someone like me would be censored. I mean, I'm not even that partisan, it's pretty far. I mean, it's gone pretty far at this point. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I like liberating the sort of the spirit of truthfulness. And a few people reached out to me saying, "Oh, did you know this controversy with Charles?" And all I just said is, "I know," and we're here. So maybe the last question that we can tag in is Zach. Zach, you had a good question about community.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Peter and Charles. I'll echo what Laura said earlier about your sweater and your tapestry behind you, and just like, you are so present on so many different levels here, and it is noticed and appreciated. So thank you for that. My question around community is, like, can you speak, and it actually kind of ties into your last comment as well, the community that's formed around you as an individual and even as a brand, even as humbly as you hold that brand with your Substack newsletter, and then the brand of community that the Stoa is with Peter as kind of the steward, and an individual who's kind of affiliated with the brand, but he's not the brand explicitly in name. Can you speak to some of that, maybe even as it came to canceling or showing up, or your identity, or whatever is coming up for you? And I form that question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what you mean. I mean, I've thought, like, man, maybe from the beginning I should have just written under a pseudonym, to avoid all of this projection and pedestaling, and then the dismay and betrayal people feel when I'm revealed as actually just like an imperfect human being. The thing is, I'm maybe a better speaker than I am a writer. I mean, I'm pretty good with words in general, but like, it's a lot harder to be anonymous as a speaker, So, and then there was like this part of me that's like, in shying away from leadership, like, how is that just like my comfort zone, about is that actually humility, or is that aversion to conflict, aversion to choice, wanting to play it safe, wanting to not take responsibility? Like, am I really serving by pretending to be more humble than I really am? All these things come into it, but at this point, it feels somewhat irreversible. To, like, I don't know, it's part of the job description of public intellectual or whatever I am. I don't know. I'm open to suggestions. I don't enjoy being scrutinized. And I don't know. I'm not going to start complaining, but I don't know if this meets your question at all.
Yeah, it kind of did it, but maybe even more honing in on a better way for me to ask is just the community that is around you, and just even with the title of this conversation, and how we sort of do these things together. There's a container for the Stoa, and the container for Charles is Charles, but yet, if you're a star and there's a constellation, we're gathering around you at some point. So just how do you make sense of all that?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's different than the Stoa. And I also started a community on Mighty Networks called A New and Ancient Story that has several thousand members. And it's not, the Charles Eisenstein community. It's called A New and Ancient Story. It's guiding principles, reverence in communication, reverence for each other. And I'm hosting it, but most of the work is done by my amazing ex-wife, Patsy. And like, we're talking about now turning it over to a group who have, been active in the community, so I can step out of it in that role. Because, yeah, I'm not necessarily a good manager or a good people organizer or like any of that stuff. That's maybe not my role. But I also don't want to disavow the particular gift that I have. And this gift has always existed in society. There were storytellers, there were playwrights in ancient Greece. I mean, there are people who naturally, because of the nature of their offering, gather people around them. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. It's a problematic thing, but it's not necessarily something to repudiate. But yeah, I guess I don't have a committed position on it. I'm just learning about how to navigate it. Maybe I'll totally become a hermit someday. I don't know. I've definitely contemplated that in the last year with, like, when I was getting deplatformed and denounced, I'm like, fuck it. I can just go, homestead somewhere. And, I like raising chickens and planting vegetables and swimming in ponds. Mm-hmm.
Sounds very similar to the beautiful vision that you were poetically expressing earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we'll close here. Any kind of closing thoughts or words you'd like to leave us with, Charles?
Wow. I mean, I'm just like really impressed by the thoughtfulness and intelligence and sincerity of this community, like, which I'm picking up not just from, the words that were shared with me, but just, peering a level deeper in. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So I'm honored to be here. Yeah, hopefully that doesn't sound too flattering, but I really am impressed.
That lands quite well coming from you and someone who I deeply respect. And yeah, very grateful for your work, and on behalf of the Stoa, lots of love and gratitude for doing what you do. And hopefully, if you do live the homesteader gangster life, you'll still be writing fire missives on your Substack. And we'd love to have you come back for another session, of course.
Yeah, great.
So just to make a closing announcements at the Stoa, 2 upcoming events, Deep Philosophy with Rand Levon. This is a mixture of like philosophical inquiry and kind of collective presencing, which is pretty cool. It's going to be at 12 p.m. Eastern time. And then on Thursday, we have the Flow game, like this game that helps craft a really beautiful question, which I'm quite excited about there. You can RSVP there to all those events and more at thestoa.ca. So that being said, Charles, everyone, thank you so much for coming to the Stoa today.
Thanks, everybody.